Hello. So for Module 1, I decided to focus on the basic accounting equation. I chose the basic accounting equation because it's one of the most basic tools when it comes to accounting, and probably one of the most important ones as well, because it's used by businesses to uh, make sure they have everything in balance, all their checks and balances, and it's really just a measure of ownership of claims and debts for that business owner. So it's really important. So what is the basic accounting equation? So the accounting equation is assets equals liabilities plus equity. Most important thing when it comes to this accounting equation is that it must always be in balance. So the assets, whatever the assets are, it must always equal liabilities plus equity. So a simple example of that is if your assets equal 500,000, then your liabilities, and if your liabilities equal 250,000, then that means that your equity must equal 250,000 as well. So that way it balances on both sides, being 50,000 or 500,000, I'm sorry. So breaking down the accounting equation here, what is an asset? So an asset itself is the benefit. An asset to a company is, it kind of explains how the company kind of benefits in the future. So examples of assets would be things like cash, land, inventory, all things that the company already has ownership over. Those are all assets to the company. Those are all ways that they are going to benefit in the future because they have that ownership over those items. What are liabilities? So liabilities, you can kind of think of it as it's a debt that the business owes to a creditor. So whenever a debt is owed to a creditor, that means that that creditor then has some sort of a partial claim in the assets of the business until that debt is paid off. Once that debt is paid off, nothing then is owed to the creditor, so therefore the creditor does not have any sort of claim into the assets of the company. So when looking at liabilities, we can think of liabilities as things that have the word payable in it. So you'll see like accounts payable, notes payable, things like that. Those are all liabilities because they are owed to the creditor. So the business must pay them. Now, when it comes to equity, what is equity? So equity are assets left over after the liabilities have been paid. So we could look at it breaking down equity into owner capital, owner withdrawals, revenues, and expenses. So equity itself equals, you can take total revenues, but from there you're going to subtract expenses, you're going to subtract owner capital, and you're going to subtract owner withdrawals, because those are all things that can deduct from the cash and the assets of the company. So that's one way that we can look at equity itself. So you can see there how the assets are on the one side are things that the company has ownership over, whereas when we're looking at liabilities and equity, which are the two things that are on the right side of the accounting equation, those are things that the company or the business does not have ownership over. So that's a good way to kind of look at that. And then as far as ethics goes, what I put here was making sure that a business is keeping a record of everything and that they're staying in balance. So I think it's super important, especially for like new businesses or younger businesses or business owners that are maybe less experienced, that they make sure that they keep record of everything, so that way when they go to balance everything out with the accounting equation, they can make sure that their assets are equal on the one side next to their liabilities and equity. Some people maybe might lie about things like that or whatever it may be. So the Bible verse that I used is, "For we are taking pains to do what is right, not only in the eyes of the Lord, but also in the eyes of man." So 2 Corinthians 8:21. So I chose that Bible verse. It's pretty simple, but really just saying that to make sure that it's equally important that we do things right in the eyes of other people, but we're also ultimately doing it to make sure that we're doing what is right in the eyes of the Lord. So it's super, super important. So I think sometimes that gets overlooked, that we think like, oh, just, who cares that some other person, might find this out or might not find this out. But, ultimately, we have to know that it's not just other people who are going to see these things, but God who sees all. So thank you.